Dear students, I have to deal with two texts. One is Adversaries Crisis in Orientalism, another Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Both are groundbreaking texts from the world of post-colonialism. Hence, it is important, in a way, compulsory to have discourse over post-colonialism, which is a very wide field of study in the entire domain of literature. Post-colonialism is a wide term, a complex phenomenon which has its root in the history of imperialism. In this lecture, today I will try to make clear some of the concepts like colonialism and imperialism and how the history of decolonization is important to know, and at the same time the shift that intellectuals have brought in the field of study from Commonwealth literature to post-colonial world of study. Now, when we move ahead and we try to know in general, in very simple way, what is this post-colonialism? Like when there is an ism, so definitely there is a kind of ideology, there is something that is common to the vast area of study. Like under post-colonial world, so many texts and so many names can be quoted. I will take some of the names later on. But when we look at this term, we can say that whenever it is experienced, either it is in novel or in criticism, in any mode of literary expression, it means that there is eradication of the values established by the colonial power in terms of economy, in terms of society, in terms of politics. That means overall eradication of the ideologies and values. Or you can say that when you come across critical analysis of history, culture and modes of discourse available to you in the former colonies of England, Spain, Germany or of other European countries. So this is how roughly a kind of picture we may create in our mind of this term post-colonialism, which means whenever there is violation of the principles established by the colonial rule and power from the perspective of the colonized country, that is what post-colonial literature or post-colonialism in general deals with. Now when we try to understand more and more the beginning of this particular school of study, then the talk comes like that before 1980s it was not in existence, or especially when you talk about post-colonial criticism, because we have to take here Edward Said also, then before 1990s this category was not in existence. So this is the reason I will before Said like to take here Commonwealth discourse and critical analysis of the colonial discourse, right? So here when you look at the term post-colonialism, sometimes it comes with hyphen and sometimes it is without hyphen. The moment it is in running, that means we are not talking about that historical period which we denote with the hyphenated post-colonialism. After independence or after colonial era or after colonial duration, it is. But so hyphenated post-colonialism is concerned or it is related with particular historical period, that means after colonial power or after independence. Whereas when we are taking this particular term in running without hyphen, it means not that historical condition, rather it's a kind of ideology, rather there is a kind of philosophy. When we continue, when we trace that even in during colonial literature, we call it as post-colonialism. So here it can be stated or it can be said that post-colonial literature is not having this binding that it is going to occur or it has occurred only after colonial rule or power or after independence. It means that literary pieces available to us during colonial era, they can be also called as post-colonial literature. We can take so many examples, but before that, when we move ahead and when we start our discourse over post-colonialism, first important thing to understand what is called as colonialism, right? So general definition of colonialism, if you try to trace in the dictionary, that means Oxford Dictionary, or you go through the literary dictionary of Cudden or through the book of M.H. Abraham, what do you notice? That whenever forcibly a country occupies this, a state, land of the another country, that means the colony is established, that is called colonialism, right? So look at the word colonialism, colony, colonia, that means in Latin when you have establishment of your own territory in somebody's other's land, in other's country, that is the practice of colonialism. And in dictionaries the most famous example we find it's of Roman empires, right? So you know that 410 is the year when Romans, they left England. So before becoming a colonial power in the 19th century, England was itself a colonized nation, and Romans were the colonial power, right? So imperial power of the Rome was practiced in England and in many other countries, and England was also a victim of that. So in general, when we talk about colonialism, whenever there is settlement of new location in others' territory, that is called colonialism. As I told you that it has its root in imperialism, so here it becomes important to define what is called imperialism, right? So when you talk about imperialism, it sounds like colonialism, meaning to say that imperialism is a strategy through which you try to keep control over each and every activity of somebody's other's land or of somebody's other's state, right? So this imperialism is not only physical ruling, rather it tries to establish its own ideals in the field of politics, in the field of language, in the field of culture. So through imperialism, every kind of violence is done, that is epistemic violence, that can be cultural violence, that can be overall violence. So overall control forcibly by one country over the another one can be defined as imperialism. Now when we look at the history of imperialism, this term is popular in the 19th century. But let me tell you that this imperialism was just popularized in 19th century. It is as old as human civilization. So if you go back and trace the history of Eastern and Western world, both the societies, like both the parts of the world, East and West, they have experienced different forms of imperialism, right? So most of the time in name of civilizing the barbarians, people have entered, that means the imperial powers, different imperial powers, they have entered and they established their colonies. Most of the time it is seen. So just I want to highlight here that imperialism has its relation with the human society, with the human being since times immemorial, we can say so, if we turn the pages of history. Apart from England, because we know that England is the greatest imperial power of the 19th century, means from 18th century its journey started the moment in India, East India Company got established, and many countries like South Asia, New Zealand, Burma, Sudan, Canada, Australia, Caribbean, Ireland, so many countries, even America, it was under the control of the British Empire. So it was stated at that time that sun never sets in England. So as far as the British imperial power is concerned, or Britishers as great colonizers, we have this image because we are having first-hand experience being an Indian student or Indian scholar, right? So apart from England, apart from Britain, the another power that was very popular, another imperial power, it was France, and it has ruled over many countries. Germany was also there. And most important thing I would like to mention here, in 1855, Belgium, the way it has established, the Belgium Congo in the heart of Africa. So if you go through the Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, you will find the horrific experience of this Belgium Congo in the novel that is by Joseph Conrad called Heart of Darkness, another very important and groundbreaking work. So here when we look at the history of, when we try to understand colonialism, we went back into imperialism, and what is imperialism I made clear, and then what is the history of imperialism. Apart from this, when you try to understand more and more this term colonialism, it engenders many significations, but I will try to encompass here 2 to 3 important significations, that means 2 to 3 another definitions of colonialism. As you know, colonialism is associated with Marxist notion of capitalism. So needless to mention that colonialism is started with the profitable intention of trade, or with the economic growth and economic intention. So it is, I think nobody is going to deny that how colonialism is started, especially when you are talking about British colonizers, right? So in the name of civilizing the barbarians, or for business, for trade, for making money, right? And slowly and gradually with a kind of a strategy, the victimization or the kind of inferior consciousness is insulated in the heart and mind of the colonized people. So it's a kind of a strategy through which colonizers, they always made colonized people feel low about themselves, right? But these identifications take place later on, because when you are identifying that somebody is trying to make you realize low, then definitely you will not feel so. That means this realization was absent. The moment this realization is started, at that time colonial discourse starts, right? So this relationship between colonialism and capitalism is the another important angle, and I think everybody is going to agree, because the notion of the capitalism where this class consciousness is there, always capitalist class, that means the bourgeois class tries to have rule over the those who are weak in economy, those who are weak in their ideology, that means those who are not having power in terms of society, and power of course comes with economy. So same connection can be traced here between colonialism and capitalism. Another definition of this colonialism can be related with the social Darwinism. You know, there are thinkers like Machiavelli, Hitler, Mussolini, Bacon. These people, they have associated colonial struggle as the part of natural struggle for survival. Whereas there is a figure, his name is Rudyard Kipling, most famous. He says that it happens, and history is a kind of proof that whenever barbarians are enough in number, or ignorant people, they are more in number than civilized people, they come and they keep control over the barbarians, and this is how colonialism should be taken. It was the view of the Rudyard Kipling. Now, after taking these definitions from the original definition, like how the new settlement of location, to this Rudyard Kipling, I would like to highlight here another angle in this definition of colonialism in relation to imperialism. As far as these two terms are concerned, I have given explanation of both the terms, what is called colonialism and what is called imperialism. But when you look at the relationship between the two terms, if you do not pay attention closely, concept wise, you may take both are similar, or both are in a way synonymous with each other. But let me tell you that colonialism is just a part of imperialism, right? So imperialism is wider in nature, whereas colonialism is the best form of practice of imperialism. So for practicing the power of colonialism, you need to go and settle your colonies in the foreign countries, in the other countries forcibly. Whereas for practicing imperial power, you do not require this geographical land and territory. Mind it. So the moment you talk about colonial power, you just be cautious that you are not talking about imperial power, right? So colonial power is the specific historical experience. That means in a particular time, there is a fixed time period from where to from where it started and where it ends, like when the colonies started establishing and when one or another country got freedom from the colonizers. That is known as the Independence Day of that particular country, as we are having 1947 year, right? So many countries were under the colonial power, and slowly and gradually they got freedom, right? So but what is the here remarkable, that through colonialism, imperial power is practiced well, but it doesn't mean that when colonialism is over, imperialism is over. I want to suggest that the moment there was decline in the power of the England, right, when Second World War got over, the kind of decline, the kind of downfall that was noticed in the English society, and obviously that was economic downfall. So at that time the new superpower started emerging, and it was nobody else but America, right? So in this global order, the superpower was America, and it started emerging after Second World War. So what can be called here imperialism without colonial practice? Still it is practiced on many countries. So when you find that America, countries, superpowers like America, they are having their eyes over the economic opportunities of other countries, and obviously the moment they are exploiting the economic opportunities of other countries, it is not direct, it is not a straight way. They are having a strategy, and that strategy is indirect strategy, like how to take your money, means from your pocket, how they can take money in their bank, right? So through the means of trade, through mental colonization, and various means through which they can have hold over the market and trade of the many countries, and especially countries like India, because we are populous, right? India is a populous country, large number of population is here. So I mean to suggest that colonialism is virtually over, right? But imperialism is existing, and it may exist, okay? And same example I should here in current context give up China, because not only America but China is the another emerging power. In fact, the a power that has emerged from the Asia, right? So both the countries, China and America, actually I am talking about the situation that was exactly before this COVID-19, right? So both the countries, they try to formulate strategies how to have control over the economic means of other countries, right? So this can be called as the new form of colonialism. If colonialism, that means to torture another countries forcibly. So the strategy that is made indirectly by such countries, they are in a way trying to practice imperialism. Here it becomes important to point out COVID-19 situation, and we do not know the truth, but if the such news is available to us that perhaps from the lab of the Wuhan, China, this coronavirus is spread, and if it is the true case, then it can be said that the brutal game China has played for being the superpower or for practicing its imperialist ideals, right? So I hope you are getting the difference between colonialism and imperialism. Colonialism is just one part of imperialism. Imperialism is wider in nature, and it can be practiced even without colonial power. So in a way, new colonialism you can say, or the new way of taking control over the others' territory, other means of economy. And yes, I should point out here that when we discuss about colonialism, physical violence is most ugly, most the worst aspect of colonialism. As you know that many countries were under colonial power, and indigenous people, they were brutally killed, they were brutally murdered in order to have complete sovereignty of that colonized nation, because whenever there will be indigenous people, that means the natives of that particular country, they will keep on fighting. So these strategies were made by the colonizers that if we will kill, if we will completely destroy these colonizers, these colonized people, then the story will be over. So I think these terms are clear to you, which I here pointed out, colonialism and different definition of colonialism, and the imperialism, history of imperialism, and then the distinction between colonialism and imperialism. As I said in the beginning that I will try to encompass in my lecture historical experiences of decolonization and Commonwealth literature. So I think that in my today's talk I won't be able to encompass Commonwealth literature, but here I am going to talk about the decolonization, because when we have to understand post-colonial literature, then two points are most important. One is the historical experience of decolonization, and another Commonwealth literature. So Commonwealth literature I will cover in my next lecture. Now what is called this decolonization? When we are talking about decolonization, that means necessarily when a colonized country starts coming out of the grip of the colonizer, it means the freedom is achieved, or a kind of sovereignty is achieved by the colonized people over their own country by their struggle and battle. That is what called as process of decolonization. And if we take example of the British colonizers, then we can divide this process of decolonization into three parts, or the three states of British decolonization. First one is the late 18th century, when America got freedom, right? Second is the late 19th century and first decade of 20th century, when the countries like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and I think Asian countries were not there, they were in the third phase. These countries, they got freedom, right? So the decolonization took place. But remarkable thing is that these countries are called as settler nations. Now what is the meaning of settler nations? Settler nations, that means when indigenous people are completely killed and settlers are now settled in that colonized nation, right? So colonizers are now going to be inhabitants of that colonized country, right? For example, Aboriginals of Australia, they were completely destroyed. Black people in South Africa, large number of people, means black people, they were destroyed, or they were killed, brutally killed. So if you look at the cricket team of this particular country, South Africa, you find black and white people both. So original people of South Africa, they are black, they are not white people. White people are the Britishers, right? So they got settled there. So second phase of decolonization, it includes those countries which most of the country, out of which most of the countries have lost the natives, that means the original indigenous people of their own country, and these Britishers were settled there in a large number. So in a way, roundabout, they are ruling over these second phase of decolonized countries. Now when we come to the third phase of decolonization, most of the countries are from the zone of Asia, Sudan, Burma, Indochina, China. These are the countries, they got decolonized. Now, when we talk about the process of decolonization, many things can be discussed, or many things can be brought here on the surface from the history. As I have to deal with Edward Said, I don't want to give a very wide lecture, but here I would like to mention one thing, that out of many reasons, one reason was very prominent, and that was the nationalist movement, that which took place in both settler and settled nation both, right? So nationalist movements, or the nationalist discourses, or the consciousness of nation, it is most important or integral aspect of the post-colonial discourses or post-colonialism. As you know that French Fanon is here. He talks about the nationalist discourses who joined later on Algerian battle, who was from France, and Homi K. Bhabha's Nation and Narration, that later on got published as Location of Culture with a kind of revision. And many writers you may find that they are Edward Said himself, his text Crisis in Orientalism, that later on got published as in a very thick book form. In a text form of the text, Orientalism is itself a kind of revisionist text where he is creating a kind of discourse over the colonialism, right? So what do we notice that these nationalist movements have played vital role in this process of decolonization. So if you look at India, for example, Gandhi and Nehru, the way different bodies were established there, and quit movement like Bharat Chodo Andolan, Namak Andolan, Satyagraha, and many movements took place which can be compiled under the movements of nationalism, right? And of course, whenever there is a great struggle, contribution is not of only one person or two person, but this is the collective effort, it can be called. So this very spirit or this very consciousness of nationalism is most important when you try to understand process of decolonization. Now, when we talk about post-colonial literature or Commonwealth, before post-colonial, this Commonwealth literature, I would like to deal with you some of the ignored texts in my next video. So in next one, I will talk about Commonwealth literature and discourse over colonialism, and how discourse over colonialism that is popular with two figures, French Fanon and Edward Said himself. So for now, thank you. In case of any confusion, you may ask questions.